"Walk away from Kelian tonight," my father said, planting himself between us and the patio door. "Or stop coming around this family." For a second, Adrian just stared at him. Then he glanced at my mother, Marissa, as if waiting for her to laugh and admit this was some sick joke. She didn't. "Talia needs someone dependable," Mom said calmly. "You two make more sense." My sister stood behind her near the sliding door, arms folded, saying nothing. I felt something inside me go cold. "Dad," I said, "you're asking my fiancé to leave me for my sister." Gordon looked at me like I was the unreasonable one. "You've always been difficult, Kelian. Talia deserves a chance at happiness." Adrian stepped beside me. "I chose Kelian," he said. "There is nothing to discuss." That should have ended it. Instead, my father's face changed. He reached down toward the unfinished garden border. When he straightened, there was a brick in his hand. "Put that down," I said. Adrian moved forward, but I stepped between them instinctively. "Dad, stop." He swung. The impact exploded across the side of my face. I slammed into the patio furniture, half falling, half collapsing as the world tilted sideways. Warm blood filled my mouth almost immediately. "Kelian." Adrian dropped beside me. And then I heard my mother laugh. Not nervously. Not in shock. She actually laughed. "Let's see if he still loves you now." For a moment, even the pain disappeared beneath the disbelief. I looked up through blurred vision and saw Talia frozen near the doorway. My father still had the brick hanging at his side, breathing hard like I had somehow forced him to do it. Adrian turned slowly toward my mother. "What did you just say?" Marissa lifted one shoulder. "You heard me." Adrian's jaw tightened. Then his hand moved toward the phone sitting face down on the patio table. That was when my father noticed it too. His expression shifted. "Why are you touching your phone?" Adrian didn't answer him. He grabbed it and crouched beside me again, one hand supporting the back of my head while the other unlocked the screen. I had no idea then that this nightmare had started weeks earlier. For most of my life, my parents had trained me to give Talia whatever kept her happy. If she wanted my room, Gordon said, "You're older, be mature." If she ruined my birthday plans, Mom praised me for being the bigger person. I became good at swallowing resentment before anyone noticed it existed. Even at 29, with a career managing architectural projects and enough independence to build a life of my own, some part of me still wanted my parents to finally look at me and decide I mattered just as much. Adrian saw that weakness long before I admitted it. And when Talia started making comments about how lucky I was to have him, I brushed them off. When Mom suggested I might be better off, letting Talia have a chance with him, I told myself she couldn't possibly mean it. When Dad started contacting Adrian privately, I assumed he was just trying to scare him away. I was wrong. Because as Adrian stared at that phone screen beside my bleeding face, Gordon suddenly stopped looking angry. He looked afraid. And one question cut through everything else. What exactly had Adrian's phone captured before that brick ever touched me? The strange part was that none of this began with the brick. It began with little comments I kept convincing myself were harmless. Talia had always been the one my parents protected. Growing up, if she wanted something I had, the answer was usually the same. "You're older," Dad would say. "Be mature." Once, when we were teenagers, she decided she wanted my bedroom because mine had the bigger window. Mom actually helped her move her clothes in before anyone asked me. When I protested, she smiled like I was being childish. "You're so much easier than your sister, Kelian. That's why we can count on you." Back then, I thought being easy meant being loved. Years later, I finally understood it meant they expected me to surrender. Adrian was the first thing I refused to surrender. After we got engaged, Talia started making comments that didn't sit right with me. "You really got lucky," she said once, staring at Adrian across dinner. Men like him usually don't go for women who work as much as you do. I laughed awkwardly. Adrian didn't. A few days later, Mom asked me to stop by alone. We were sitting in her kitchen when she folded her hands and said, "Talia hasn't been herself lately." What happened? She's upset about Adrian. I frowned. Why? Mom hesitated only a second. She thinks he's the kind of man she should have ended up with. I stared at her. Okay, then you should probably tell her to stop thinking about my fiancé that way. Mom's expression tightened. That's not what I meant. My stomach dropped. She leaned closer. You've always been independent. You'd recover if things ended between you and Adrian. I actually laughed because I thought I'd misunderstood. Recover from what? From breaking off the engagement. The room went completely still. You want me to leave Adrian so Talia can have him? Don't say it like that. How else am I supposed to say it? Mom sighed. Talia needs stability. You don't. You've always landed on your feet. For the first time in my life, I didn't soften my answer. No. Her eyebrows lifted. No. Number Adrian isn't a job opportunity or a dress she wants to borrow. He's my fiancé. I stood. And if Talia is upset, she'll have to deal with being upset. That was the moment everything changed. Dad started calling Adrian directly after that. At first, Adrian wouldn't tell me exactly what was said. It's handled, he told me one evening. What does that mean? It means I don't want you worrying about him. But I noticed him saving screenshots. I noticed him writing down dates after phone calls. And one night, after Dad rang him 3 times in less than an hour, Adrian looked at me and said, "I don't want you meeting your father alone anymore." I tried to smile. Adrian, he's dramatic. He's not dangerous. Adrian didn't smile back. Then his phone buzzed. He read the message, and every bit of warmth disappeared from his face. I reached for the phone. What did he say? Adrian handed it to me. It was from Dad. Family dinner, Friday, bring Kelian. Come prepared to make your choice. The first sign that Friday night wasn't really a family dinner was the seating arrangement. When Adrian and I walked onto my parents' patio, Mom had placed his chair directly beside Talia's. Mine was across the table. Adrian looked at the place cards, then at me. Seriously. Ignore it. I picked up my card, switched it with Talia, and sat beside my fiancé. Mom watched me do it. You didn't need to rearrange everything. I changed 2 cards, Mom. Talia stared down at her plate. Nobody mentioned Dad's message. Not until dinner was finished. Then Gordon stood and raised his glass. We need to settle something tonight. My stomach tightened. Dad, don't. He ignored me. Adrian, you're a good man, dependable, family-minded, but you're making a mistake. Adrian leaned back. What mistake? Mom answered. Kelian puts her career before everything. Talia has always wanted a family-centered life. You and Talia are simply more compatible. I looked at my sister. Talia. Her face reddened, but she didn't tell them to stop. That silence answered enough. Dad put down his glass. So here's the choice. Stay engaged to Kelian and you're finished with this family, or end it and give Talia a real chance. Adrian stared at him. Then, very calmly, he took his phone from his pocket and placed it face down on the patio table. You invited us here for this. I invited you here to make the right decision. Adrian leaned forward. Kelian isn't something you can trade because your other daughter wants what she has. Dad's face hardened. I stood. We're leaving. Mom scoffed. Kelian, stop being dramatic. No, and until both of you apologize, you're not coming to our wedding. For once, I wasn't asking permission. I took Adrian's hand and headed toward the patio exit. Dad stepped directly into our path. Move, Adrian said. Dad didn't. Instead, his eyes settled on me. You've spent your whole life respecting this family. No, I've spent my whole life giving in to you. His jaw tightened. Adrian moved slightly in front of me. Gordon, move. Dad glanced toward the unfinished garden border beside the patio. Then he bent down. My stomach dropped when his fingers closed around a loose brick. Dad. He straightened with it in his hand. Talia pushed away from the doorway. Dad, what are you doing? But Gordon wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Adrian. You still have time to choose correctly. Adrian stepped beside me and met his eyes. I already did. Call an ambulance. Adrian's voice cut through the ringing in my ears. I was still on the ground beside the patio furniture, one hand pressed against my face, when Dad finally dropped the brick. It struck the paving stones with a dull thud. I barely touched her, Gordon snapped. Adrian stared at him. You hit her with a brick. She came at me. I tried to lift my head. What? Mom moved beside Dad immediately. Everyone was emotional, she said. Kelian rushed toward him. Gordon was defending himself. Minutes earlier, she had laughed while I was bleeding. Now she was building an explanation. Adrian called emergency services and stayed beside me until paramedics arrived. At the hospital, doctors treated the injuries to my cheek and mouth while an officer took Adrian's initial statement. I thought my parents would eventually call and tell me to forgive Dad because he had lost his temper. Instead, my phone started vibrating. An aunt texted first. Your father says you attacked him. What happened? Then another relative. Then another. Mom and Dad had already started telling people I became violent because of an argument over Adrian. Mom claimed Dad picked up the brick because he was frightened and that I was injured accidentally. One message made my stomach turn. Kelian, apologize before your father gets into serious trouble because of you. I lowered the phone. They're blaming me. Adrian looked up from the chair beside my hospital bed. They're lying. Then I remembered something. Your phone. His expression changed. At dinner, I said, you put it face down on the table, and before that you kept saving Dad's messages. Adrian was silent for a moment. His calls were getting worse. What did you do? I started recording before the confrontation. I stared at him. You recorded dinner. He nodded. I was worried Gordon would threaten me again. I wanted proof of what he was saying. My pulse quickened. Did you stop recording when we stood up? No. That single word changed everything. The ultimatum. Dad blocking us. The brick. Mom laughing. Her words. It might all be there. Do they know? No. Adrian pulled out his phone. Before he could open the recording, the hospital room door swung inward. The officer who had spoken with him earlier stepped inside. His expression was serious. Ms. Dapper, he said, your father just gave us a very different version of what happened. Adrian didn't argue with the officer. He simply unlocked his phone. I think you need to hear this. The officer pulled a chair closer while Adrian opened the recording. I lay against the hospital pillow, my cheek swollen beneath the dressing, listening as that dinner came back through the speaker. Mom's voice came first. Talia has always been more family-oriented. Then Dad. You can walk away from Kelian tonight, or you can stop coming around this family. My stomach tightened, even though I already knew what came next. Adrian's recorded voice remained calm. I chose Kelian. There is nothing to discuss. Then came my voice telling Dad we were leaving. The scrape of chairs. Adrian telling him to move. Dad refusing. And finally, you still have time to choose correctly. I already did. There was movement on the recording. My voice, Dad, stop. Then the impact. The officer's expression changed. Adrian shouting my name came next. And over everything else, clear enough that nobody could mistake it, was my mother's laugh. Then her voice. Let's see if he still loves you now. Nobody spoke when the recording ended. Adrian showed the officer the messages he had saved too, including Dad's instruction to come to dinner, prepared to make your choice. Suddenly, this wasn't my word against my parents. Their own voices had told the story. When Gordon and Marissa learned the confrontation had been recorded, their version began collapsing. Dad stopped insisting I had attacked him. Mom changed tactics. She's twisting everything, she said. What I said was because I was in shock. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue about. The recording and my medical injuries became central evidence as Dad faced criminal charges over the assault. Mom's statements and her part in pushing the false account were documented during the investigation. And the relatives who had ordered me to apologize. Their messages changed too. Kelian, we didn't know. Your parents told us something completely different. Some apologized. Others disappeared. I stopped chasing either group. A few days after my treatment, Adrian sat beside me while I looked at my reflection. The swelling was still obvious. I touched the edge of the bandage. Then Mom's words came back to me. Let's see if he still loves you. Adrian. Yeah. I struggled to ask it. Do you look at me differently now? He reached for my hand. Yes. My chest tightened. Then he continued. I look at you and wonder why you spent so many years believing you had to surrender everything to deserve a family. I looked down. He squeezed my fingers. What Gordon did doesn't change why I chose you. That was the moment my mother's cruelest sentence finally lost its power. Talia eventually distanced herself from Mom and Dad's version too. Hearing exactly how they had tried to offer Adrian to her left her humiliated. I didn't demand an apology from her. I didn't compete with her. For the first time, I simply stepped out of the competition altogether. Dad lost something he had controlled for years, the family narrative. Mom lost the ability to rewrite what happened behind closed doors and expect me to accept her version. And they both lost access to the daughter who had always been expected to forgive first. I stopped paying family expenses. I ended direct contact with them and kept necessary communication through the appropriate legal channels while the case moved forward. Adrian and I postponed our wedding until I had recovered further. Not because Dad had damaged our engagement. Because I refused to let what happened on that patio define the day Adrian and I started our marriage. Months later, on the morning of our rescheduled wedding, I stood in front of a mirror. Most of the injury had healed. A faint scar remained. I ran one finger beside it. For years, I had looked at myself through my parents' eyes. The difficult daughter, the independent daughter, the daughter who could always handle losing one more thing because Talia supposedly needed it more. I didn't see that woman anymore. I saw the woman who had finally said no. Then I walked out. Adrian was waiting for me, exactly where he promised he would be. And when he saw me, he smiled. My father thought one brick could make Adrian stop choosing me. Instead, it was the last time my family ever got to choose anything for me.